Check. There it is.
Welcome. We are so excited to be back with you guys this week after taking a break last week.
Yep.
Due to just the busyness, craziness, and all the things. Sickness. Yeah, all the things last week. And there honestly just was not a good time for us to record, for us to edit. And so I encourage you guys on our story on our Instagram to go and listen to the sermon that I preached just as like a filler for our podcast. I actually got to teach at church the week after Mother's Day, and I talked about comparison and how comparison like destroys you and kind of like my journey with comparison. And so if you didn't get a chance to listen to that, you can find that on Apple Podcasts or on our church's YouTube account. That's available too. So
Go check it out.
Go check it out. Was it good?
Yeah, it was good.
Was it?
But also our church is banging, so.
Oh yeah, we have an awesome
check it
church.
out.
Check out the whole service. We have an awesome worship team, and I felt like my sermon went over well. I got a lot of really good response from it. And
every time you preach, it's great. I
only preach like once a year.
But you, like, every time you do it, though, you're like, I don't know. Every time you do it, it's great.
It's not that I'm not, like, confident in myself. It's not like I, think of myself as, like, no, I can't do that. It's just that is not what I normally do. Like, I don't normally teach or,
but you're good at it.
Preach. And I didn't go to like ministry school for that. So I didn't learn how to do like a sermon outline, and I'm not like,
I think that's good. Like,
yeah, I mean, I'm just me.
It changes things up.
Yeah.
And like all that. 'Cause most of the other people I think all of the other people that preach, guests that we have come in, the actual people that preach, Cole, any of our other guys that preach at church besides Katie.
Yeah.
Like, you two are the only other people that like we don't really
know how to like do that.
Yeah.
And it's not that I'm like, because the whole idea for my sermon is not to compare yourself and to like be confident in who you are. So it's not that I'm saying
maybe take your own advice.
No, it's not that I'm saying I'm not confident. It's just I always wonder if it went over well to other people, like if they received it well, because it doesn't sound like Cole.
Yeah.
And I'm never going to be Cole, and I'm never going to pretend to be, because that's not who I am. I don't preach like him. We have different preaching styles. I'm also not as theological as him. I also haven't been going to school for all like the things that he's been going to school for as far as like study and all that. So
sounds like comparison.
No.
Maybe you should go listen to your own sermon. Take your own advice that you told all these people and go listen to your own sermon.
I am confident in what I do, and I don't ever want to be somebody else. I just always wonder, like, I wonder if people receive that well because of what they're used to. Yeah. But I know that I'm not Pastor Casey. I'm not Pastor Cole. I'm me. And me is usually leading worship. So I know that I am it looks different. Anyways, all that to say, thank you so much. If you did listen to it, I hope you guys enjoyed it. It's something that I've really been just like working on within myself. And I said it in the sermon, and maybe if you didn't listen to it, one of the things that I've even like talked about it with friends, I've counseled people about it. I've even like posted it on social media, but like something within comparison that I've really been working on within myself is learning to just be so confident of my weaknesses and like recognizing, hey, I'm not good at this. And I am super confident in that. And I am not ashamed of that. Yep. There are things that I'm just not wired to do. There's things that I'm just not great at.
Yep.
And why would I want to be someone else? Like, that's not who I am. And I can't make myself be that way. And that has actually caused me to just love myself better, because you can't, like one of the things I said in my sermon is like, you can't take my joy. Like they say comparison is the thief of joy, but like you can't take that from me when I'm very aware. Like the example that I used in my sermon was like, I'm not an administrative person. I'm not a scheduled person. I'm not a structured person. I am not a planner. I'm not good at things like that. Like I do my best on things that need to be done. And I've gotten better since becoming a mom, because there has to be some kind of structure to a degree.
Or marrying me.
And marrying you for sure. But that's not who I am. And I don't try to become that person. I'm just very aware of like, this is not my strength. So you can't take my joy, because I'm aware and I'm confident in the things that I am good at. Mm-hmm. Like, I am good at so many other things that doesn't take away from who I am just because I'm not those things. Yep. So anyways, that's just a little side note of what I kind of talked about.
Maybe we just need to do an episode on comparison. Then.
Yeah, maybe we should do a whole nother, or you could just go listen to my sermon either. I do feel like there's so much more like that I could dive into about comparison. Because it has been something that's it's helped change my mental health. Not constantly, because when I first became a leader and in church, you start to really wonder, like, what am I doing? Well, all these people look like this and they do it like this. I must not be doing it right. And all that did was, it did steal my joy. It stripped so much away from me. And so just becoming confident in like, when you recognize, you know, for my example, well, Emily, you are terrible at planning things. I know. That's why I'm asking for help. Like, like when I ask Wes for help and I'm like, okay, I'm going to need you to help me plan this because I suck at this. Like if he agrees with me, like, yeah, you're going to need some help. You can't, like, I'm not ashamed of that. Like, yeah, I do. I need help. And what that does is that pulls on your strengths. So I'm acknowledging the strengths that you have while also saying, hey, I'm not great here, but I am really good at this aspect of it. So like, let's work together. So anyways, it's just been transformative for me, especially in like as a mom, as a wife, as a leader, as a friend. Like my life looks different, but that's because I'm who I am. And like, you can't strip that from me. So, yep. And it's also like, I think I said this Sunday, but me and you talked about this. Like you don't become easily defensive when people say something like, or people don't ask you to do certain things that you're not good at. Like I'm not going to be offended if someone doesn't ask me to help plan something. Yeah. Please don't.
Yeah. I say, please don't. Yeah. Like when people ask you to help plan like events or a baby shower or something, I'm like, God, please don't. Because now my life is going to be hell on earth for the next few weeks. Because I'm going to be like, I don't know what I'm doing. Literally.
Until the last day. And then I'm going to be frantically. And then I'll pull it off.
Most of the time, I don't know about it until the week of an event. And you're like, oh my gosh, I've got to do all this stuff. And I'm like, how long have you known about it? And you're like, a month and a half. I'm like, oh my gosh.
The thing is that I slowly come up with ideas in my brain. And then,
but you don't put them all together until the week of.
Yeah, correct. I'm not good at putting things together until it's like time for it.
That stresses me out.
Yeah, but I'm not good at getting it together prior, because if I try to get it together earlier, I will forget by the time it's like, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But here we are.
Anyway.
This is just nightly chats with Wes and Em.
It's late, guys.
Welcome to our TED Talk.
It's late. It's been a long week again.
It's been a rough few days.
It's been a long 2 weeks.
Yeah, it really has. What we're talking about tonight, and we're going to go into as much detail as possible, because I don't feel like me and you are amazing at these kind of conversations, because we have not, we're still on a journey, which I feel like everyone is. So I don't really know if that's like the right wording for this. but some of our theology is still being worked out, is maybe a better way to put it. So we're still kind of in like I'm not sure, and I'm still working this out kind of a place. And I really hope that this episode doesn't offend people in the Christian world. I hope that people don't decide they want to stop listening to our podcast because we were just open and honest.
We'll see.
But this is where I'm at, and this is where I've had to get to still follow the Lord, because there was a time when I didn't want to. But Wes and I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about, Wes hates the first word I'm going to say.
Oh, God.
Deconstruction / Reconstruction. That's the word you like. Reconstruction.
Yes.
Because Wes never went through a deconstruction process. Wes never tore it all down and was like ready to throw it all away the way that I did. So for me, there was a part of my life where I was like fully pulling it all down, and I like tore it all down to where I looked at Wes and said, I don't know if I want to serve God anymore. Because I don't even know if any of this is real anymore. And I can remember those very nights where we sat at our old townhouse. You were on one side in that long chair, and I was on the couch, and I was like, tears in my eyes just pouring down my face. Like, I don't know if any of this is real. And the look on your face of like, you don't believe that. And I was like, yes, huh? Like, what if it, and you're like, you don't believe that. You don't believe that any of what you used to believe is real.
Correct.
And in that moment, I was like, don't tell me what I mean. Don't tell me what I mean. I don't think I can believe this. But I had to go through a really, really, really challenging like journey of just sorting through all the stuff. And I'm also like a super logical person. So there were so many things that I was like, well, this doesn't make sense. And this doesn't make sense. And a lot of this doesn't make sense, they were valid. Yeah. I mean, you were like, you're right. It doesn't.
I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah. And I've had conversations with people in my life, which I've talked about Pastor Casey Doss on this podcast several times. He was one of the main people in my life. He was somebody that was actually in my life that I had a relationship with that helped me walk through a lot of this deconstruction in the beginning, because I was still in the process of pulling it all down, and I would just say things to him. And I think I shared this the time that I said, if my dad's watching over me, then that must mean he's watching Wes and I have sex. And Pastor Casey was like, okay, right. That's fine. Yeah, don't think that's what's happening. But he just let me like pull it all down. Mm-hmm. And then this is really special to me, but Dr. Chris Green actually was someone that I didn't have a relationship with him, but he was someone that I read books. I watched a lot of his videos. I listened to a lot of his teachings, read a lot of his articles. He's somebody that like I read and listened to, who also helped kind of keep me following Jesus, which I actually got to meet him. He actually came to and spoke at our church the Sunday right after I did. Thank God that wasn't backwards, or I would have been following the Dr. Chris.
You could have done it.
No, listen, you guys.
You could have done it.
Dr. Chris Green is standing on the stage in front of me. I'm on the front row, and I'm just, all my makeup's going down my neck.
That is a normal Sunday for you now.
No, yeah, it is. But
yeah, I get what you're saying.
It was more than just like a good sermon. There were so many emotions wrapped up in it. And like, he preached the week after I did, which is, I literally almost threw this all away. Yep. And then I preached at church, and then he comes and preaches. Like, I'm going to cry thinking about it, but just because like the significance of it for me, that I didn't throw it all away because of his teachings. And then he comes and follows right back up with me the next Sunday at the same church. And then he teaches, and like, he is one of the reasons why I didn't throw it away, because he helped me see Jesus more beautifully, and just lots of things. But obviously, our friend Cole, who's our pastor, obviously, we've had some really awesome, cool conversations that have kind of helped navigate through some like hard things that like we're still questioning and thinking about. And yeah, it's been a journey of me realizing, okay, maybe I don't want to throw this all away, because even Wes and I talked, even when I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to follow this Jesus anymore.
Yep. If this is who he
is, I don't want to follow this anymore. But even then, and Wes and I talked about this, there was something tiny that I had in like my spirit that was like, he's real. Like, you've experienced something that you can't unsee. You can't unfeel. Yep. Like, you can't just pretend like he never showed up in the hardest seasons of your life, and that he came and he was the only reason that you had peace in that, or that when you were in your most broken state, like, you knew he was there. Like, I can remember those times in my life when, even prior to the depression that I had as a mom, but when I was like a teenager and I went through like really hard times, I can remember just knowing he was there and him showing up, and even like, and not in like a weird way of, well, I just felt him in my prayer closet. Like, I mean, came, showed up, intervened, exposed me, because he was rescuing me out of something that I got myself into. And I could talk about this for hours, but I won't. But there was always a piece of me that was like, I want to give it up, because there's so much bull crap that is surrounded the Jesus. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, but I'm pretty sure when I was going through hell, the real Jesus did show up. And then church culture came and crapped it up.
Yeah.
Like, they crapped on it.
Yep.
That's the nicest word I'll say. But I do felt like I had met the real Jesus. Mm-hmm. He was just covered in mud. And we've probably mentioned and touched on this in other episodes. But obviously losing my dad, that was probably the biggest wave that came. Because
that was probably the thing that like kick-started.
Well, so when
we had questions and started talking about things before, but when you lost your dad, that's when the conversations that we started having started to turn. Yeah. And that's when things really got deep, and we were like, okay, hold on.
Well, what does
this mean?
We started piecing together, like, there were some things, like, we started noticing things in the Old Testament that didn't line up with the New Testament. Wes and I started asking a lot of questions, like, well, why does God look this way in the Old Testament and this way in the New Testament? Don't worry, this episode is not going to be about us trying to convince you what we think. But those...
Number one, because we still think different things on certain topics too.
For sure. And Wes and I could sit here for days and just go back and forth on things that I'd be like, well, I kind of think this. And he'd be like, I think you're insane. And like, we've had several conversations. Like, we've had car rides where I've just like...
I just look at her like, you're wrong.
Yeah. And I'm like, so what do you think about this? And he's like, I think you're crazy. And I'm like, you'll get there eventually. Like, I just feel like, which Wes is not as deep of a thinker about stuff like this as I am. Like, I could be in the shower and just be going on and thinking about, like, what could this mean? What picture is this trying to paint? Like, okay, what about this passage in scripture? Is this a parable? What are they trying to teach us? Like, my brain is constantly thinking about that stuff. Wes's is not. So when I bring things to him that I've been sitting on,
my brain can't. I'll think about it for 30 seconds and then I'm on to the next thing.
Yeah. So when I bring things to him that I've been sitting on for 2 weeks, and I'm like, what do you think about this? I think this, and what about this? And what if Jesus is actually trying to say this? And he's like, you're throwing a lot at me right now, and
my brain's going to overload.
I just think you're crazy. And I'm like, well, that's fine. And then eventually, like, weeks later, he'll come back around and be like, maybe you're right. I don't know. We'll maybe. So anyways, we had started conversations at home we had started asking a lot of questions to Pastor Casey because he was our pastor at the time. Sitting, and we would go to his house and just sit and talk till 3 a.m.
Starbucks, his house.
Yeah, wherever.
In the lobby at the
church.
We'd
be all night. We would just sit and talk and be like, we want to find the real Jesus. And there's been a lot of fluff.
Yep.
And I just want the real thing.
Yeah. How do we sift through everything that we've learned, and how do
everything we've learned that doesn't make sense?
Well, yeah, but how do we go through everything we've learned and say, okay, this is good.
Yeah.
That's not Jesus.
Yeah.
Or this is Jesus. That's not Jesus.
Yeah. Or what is this? What is Jesus trying to say in this? Like, even
or what
in
is
the
this picture that the Old Testament painted that Jesus is coming in and saying, that's not who I am.
Right.
But the Old Testament's saying that's who God is.
Right.
But Jesus is saying that's not who God is.
Yeah.
So, like, how do we...
But we had not gotten to that aspect.
No.
We hadn't fully grasped that Jesus had come along in the New Testament and said, I never said that. And so we were still stuck in... We were
trying to figure out, like...
Okay, Jesus is saying no violence, but there's a lot of violence in the Old Testament. And so Wes and I we were on this journey of like, okay, are we going to go to hell because we think that there's some parables in the Old Testament? Or maybe some of these stories aren't 100% what happened. Maybe they're just stories trying to tell us.
Or it is what happened and they got it wrong.
Yeah, exactly. What does hell actually look like? And so we had lots of things we were talking about. But it was very slow. We were never on the verge of giving up our faith, ever. We were just trying to find Jesus through it. But prior to my dad.
Oh, I was like, wait a second.
Sorry. I'm still talking about prior.
I don't think I ever have been there.
No, but I definitely, prior to losing my dad, it was very slow. It was we're just asking questions. We're just trying to like ask a lot of like reading, studying, trying to just like make sense of things that really my whole life I'd kind of been taught not to like ask about.
Taught not to ask questions at all, really.
Yeah, or I was kind of told like, well, you can ask God when we get to heaven.
Yep.
You know, that's kind of like the way the church like taught us. And that was never enough for me. Like, it was never enough for me to just be like, okay, why? Like, I have to live here my whole life and I don't get to understand any of this, but the Bible contradicts itself. So what am I supposed to do with that?
You thought the Bible contradicted itself.
Yes.
You can't just say the Bible contradicts itself.
Sorry.
Not on a public platform like this.
In that stage of my life, I was looking at it like the Bible's contradicting itself. Yeah. Because the Old Testament would say this, but the New Testament would say this. Or Moses said this, and then Jesus would say this. And so I felt like the Bible is contradicting itself. It doesn't make sense.
Yes. Through the lens we were looking at it through.
Yes. So anyways, Wes and I go on that slow journey. But we'd already started chipping away at some beliefs about God.
Yeah.
And then I lost my dad, and that's when the hurricane
the top popped off of the bottle.
Like I just was like, so none of this makes sense actually, and this is all bullcrap.
Yep.
And I went through
and I'm sitting there looking at her like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, like I went through a very angry stage of my grief. Anger held on for a long time.
Yep.
I think there was like what are the 5 stages of grief? Like denial. I think there was like denial for like half a second when they told us that my dad passed away. It was like there for like half a second, and then anger erupted out of me in the hospital. And I don't think it left for a long time.
Yeah, it took a couple months probably.
Yeah. I screamed at the doctor. I yelled at the funeral home man.
Oh, I forgot about that.
That poor man. I yelled at him.
I wasn't there for that, but I've heard stories.
Oh, yeah, you weren't there.
Yeah, I heard the stories.
He was trying to get us to pick out a casket, and I just felt like this is all so stupid. My dad is dead. He literally couldn't care less about a casket. Why are you literally even asking us this?
Put me in a box.
Yeah.
Don't even put me.
I just kind of like erupted, and my mom was like, she like looks at me and kind of just like gives me a look, and then looks at the man. She's like, I'm so sorry. She's really struggling with losing her dad. I was just like, this is so dumb. But then the anger of losing my dad kind of slowly started fading, but then I became very angry at the church because of all the things that I'd been taught my entire life about grief and about death.
All the things that people said at the funeral.
Yeah.
That we've heard our whole life.
Yeah. So it was like I just became extremely angry. And then I became angry at God because I've always looked to him as healer. And he's supposed to heal people. And he didn't heal my dad. So it was like, so you're not a healer. But I was very confused because I had seen miracles. Like my little sister is a miracle.
Yep.
She had polio when she was 3 months old. We could do a whole episode on that too. I haven't even talked about that on here. My little sister had polio at 3 months old and was paralyzed from the neck down in the hospital for a very long time. They basically told my mom that if she survived, she'd be a vegetable her entire life. And that's the same sister that just had a baby 2 weeks ago. Yep. She's been on dance teams, cheer teams. She's played basketball, soccer. She is totally normal. And there was a point where like my parents did not know what was going to happen in the hospital. And the doctors even said, this is a miracle. It should not be like this. Yep. I've seen a miracle.
Same.
You've seen a miracle. The girl at your church who was healed of cancer. Like, we know that they happen. So for me, I didn't understand why it didn't happen again. I mean, saying it out loud makes you sound greedy. But like in the moment, it's like, no, but you do it. So do it again.
Yep.
Like that's what you do. You heal. So do it. And then God doesn't. And so you're like, so you just pick and choose who you want to heal. It didn't matter how much faith was in the room, despite what I've been told my whole life. It didn't matter how good of a man my dad was, how much of a Christian he was, how he served the Lord his entire life, how he gave up everything to make sure that he served the Lord. None of that mattered. You just picked and choose who gets healed and who doesn't. So that was really hard for me to wrap my brain around. And so obviously I got angry at God. And then everything just became a huge blur and a giant question mark.
Everything.
Everything.
It felt like every day.
Yeah.
Every few hours I was getting a call or a text and be like, what about this?
Yeah.
What this doesn't make sense now.
Yeah.
What's going on here? Why are they saying this?
Yeah.
Jesus says this in the New Testament, but that's not clicking in my brain because of what just happened with my dad.
Yeah.
And like literally just every day, every other day was just a new question, all this stuff going on.
Yeah.
That's when I was like, I don't know. You got to go talk to Pastor Casey. I don't know.
But here's the reality is like, I appreciated that even people like Pastor Casey, like Cole, some of our friends were like, I don't know.
Yeah. When they didn't have the answer, they didn't fabricate something. They didn't take scripture out of context and try to make it fit. No. They looked at us and was like, I don't have an answer.
I mean, Cole and I have even talked because Cole and Pastor Casey, they were both there at the hospital with my dad.
Yep.
And Cole and I have talked and he's like, the hospital and then you losing your dad, he was like, that whole thing shook me.
Yeah.
He was like, that was one of the most like transformative things that have happened to me regarding healing and all of that because we all thought your dad was going to make it and he didn't.
And this wasn't, I think we've talked about it a little bit. Like when we say we all thought he was going to make it, it wasn't like we were just in the hospital waiting on the doctors.
No.
There was 20 to 30 people in the waiting room, family, friends, our pastors, his pastors, literally everybody.
My dad's brother's pastors.
And then we had a prayer meeting.
I mean,
for 5 hours, 6 hours.
They're just all up around the hospital.
And not to get into all that, but like, it's not to say like we were just sitting there waiting. Like the way we were raised, those people, if anybody, if we needed somebody to pray, especially at that point in our life, Those are the people we wanted in the room when we needed to pray for something.
Yeah, you wanted the most faith-filled people who knew how to pray.
So when we left that hospital to drive to Chattanooga that night, it was like, no, he's going to be fine.
Yeah. It was scary. Like, I had moments in the hospital where I, like, broke down and was
scary.
like, what if he...
all day.
Yeah, like, what if he doesn't make it? But it also kind of just felt like this is going to be a long journey of him. He's going to be sick. Like, he's sick. Yeah. He has 100% blockage in his heart. Like, there's a stent in it right now. They've got him stable.
Yep.
But, like, this is going to be a journey.
Yep.
Who knows when he'll wake up? He's gonna need a lot of help.
But he's going to wake up.
But eventually, I'll get to talk to him. This is just really scary right now. And it's going to change all of our lives. His, too.
And then he didn't.
Never once did I think it would look like this. Wow, we're getting into a totally different thing that I'd...
Yeah, none of this is on our notes over there.
No, I haven't even looked at my notes. That is when everything started changing with just, okay, who is Jesus?
That wasn't the main question, but that's the biggest question we ask.
Well, yes.
Who is Jesus?
Correct.
What does he mean in all of this?
Yeah.
More than just the Son of God.
Yep.
What does that all mean?
Yep. Yeah. And I think ultimately what I've learned through this is you don't have to be ashamed to deconstruct. I think that has a really ugly... Wes is like twitching over there.
I hate that word.
The reason we don't love that word is because it has been...
Let's get into that. Yes.
It has
That's on our
become
notes. Let's get into that.
It has become a trend.
Let's deconstruct because I've got church hurt.
Yeah.
And now I can use all of that to throw back at the church. And I'm not going back to church anymore because of that.
Yeah.
And never reconstruct.
Yeah.
The whole point of deconstruction, again, I hate that word. The whole point of that is to build back up what you actually believe.
Yeah.
Not to just tear it all down and forget about it.
Yeah.
So that's why I hate that word. And like in your position that you were in, you had already, like we had already started to reconstruct what we thought. We were asking questions, we were taking things out and putting them back in, we were doing all that stuff.
And thank God, because if I had lost my dad before doing that,
I
would have become I would have become a nutcase because I genuinely would have been so still wrapped up in that, those ideas about God while losing someone. And I would have had no idea how to actually see the real Jesus in that. So thank God I'd started chipping away prior. Yeah. I believe that happened for a reason.
Yeah. All of this stuff was happening. And then all of a sudden, you were in a place of like, after we were taking these things out and replacing them, you had taken out so many things because all of this stuff was happening at once and you weren't replacing them because so much stuff was happening and you were asking so many questions all at once, you weren't replacing anything. So you got to a point to where you were fully deconstructed. You were at the point where I was just talking about of taking it all down and throwing it away. I'm done with this. I can't deal with it. It's too much.
It doesn't make sense. It's not what I thought.
Which that's what's scary about deconstruction. Because when you tear it all down and then you start looking at everything that you've learned, everything you have to study now to figure out what of this that you learned is bull crap and what is not. That's a lot. So then you have to go through and start picking those things back up. And a lot of people, and you work to this point of where I'm just done with it. I'm done. Which is why I hate the word deconstruction. I hate when people deconstruct because it's not helpful most of the times. I'm not saying it's not helpful. Most of the time it's not helpful.
I think deconstruction needs to be met with reconstruction just every time. Because if you are going to pull something down and deconstruct it, you need to find something that like
that. Yeah, that's why.
That reconstructs.
That's why I think when you start going through this process, if you ever go through this process, reconstruction is the only answer, in my opinion. because, like I said, when you look at it after you've deconstructed, there's so much.
It's just a bunch
of... especially if you're like me and you get overwhelmed because there's so much happening and so many questions and you can't answer them all at once that you're just like, forget this. Like, I can't do this. When if you're reconstructing, you can take things out. You can go through and ask certain questions of things that you've learned, things that you've read in the Bible and all this stuff. And you can ask a few questions at a time and pull them out and go, do I believe this?
About God.
About God, about Jesus, about the Bible, about humans, whatever it is. Do I believe this? And if you do, you just put it back. You're like, great. Ask another question. No? Okay, let's throw that away. This is what I believe now about this. So that point from there...
Or no, I don't think I believe this. It doesn't look like God. So what do I believe?
Yeah.
Where is Jesus in this? Because ultimately, the goal in deconstruction / reconstruction is to find Jesus.
Correct.
That's the end
most
goal.
Important question, like I said earlier.
It's to find the real Jesus.
Correct.
That is the goal. It is not to push your agenda. It is not to have to now be on with the trend of the hashtag. It is not to
throw shade at the church.
No, it is not to be angry at the church.
And don't get me wrong. The church as a whole over history.
They have gotten it wrong.
And now.
Yeah.
We have gotten it wrong.
Yeah.
As the church, as a whole.
Yep.
We have gotten it wrong.
Yep.
As
in
Christians,
so many ways.
as people, as the church, we have gotten it wrong.
And we need to be okay with acknowledging that we have gotten it wrong.
We're not saying, like, don't throw shade at the church. Like, the church is perfect. That's not what we're saying. And we're not saying don't question the church.
Yep.
I would never say that. I would never say don't question the church. Don't question leaders. I would never say that. I mean, I heard, I was listening to a podcast the other day. I don't remember the guy's name. But he was talking and he said basically, because the guy asked, like, we've been taught don't ask questions. The Bible teaches don't ask questions. And the guy stopped him and was like, no, the Bible and Jesus looks at everybody and says, I welcome it. I welcome the questions. My place here is to teach who God is, because all of you and all of your descendants and all the people and prophets that you look up to have gotten it wrong. Ask the questions and let me be the filter that you're seeing all of this stuff through now.
Yeah.
I'm the visible image of the invisible God.
Correct.
Ask me the questions and I will point you to where he is. So we're not saying don't ask questions. Yeah. Don't question leadership. Don't question the church. We're not saying that. We're saying don't throw the shade because you've taken all this down now and you've thrown it away and now you're like, well, screw the church.
Well, one of the things that I learned through this is that a lot of the times people that said things to me that didn't make sense, that's all they were ever taught too.
Yeah.
So like all of the bitterness that I became angry at people for teaching me all these things that I don't believe anymore, there's no point in me being bitter at them. Like, no. That's what they were taught too. Now, I do think there's people out there who were not taught certain things and they just believe wacko stuff and they just be saying wacko things.
Agreed.
But to me, it's like...
And that is still prevalent today.
Still happening. Still happening. But for me, I'm like, there is an injustice in that. And I believe those things will be dealt with. I believe they are being dealt with. I also have found just a grace for people, like people in my life who really do genuinely love Jesus. They just or only really know what they've been taught. And I can't blame them. No. I think that there is a growth for all of us. I, at one point, was giving horrible advice. I was saying off the wall things because that's all that I knew until I knew better. And once you know better and once you meet the real Jesus, at that point, you can show the real Jesus.
Correct.
Because that's what you know now. But I do think there is a process that we go through when we learn the new version of God that we come in contact with once we sift through all of the bullcrap. And I think you go through a journey of healing from those old views of God.
Yeah.
And learning to forgive others and learning to forgive yourself, learning to heal through, oh, I had this so wrong. Because at the end of the day, Jesus is not mad that we didn't have it right. That's why he reveals himself. He's just trying to reveal himself and show you himself more and more. As long as you continue to seek, you'll find him. Mm-hmm. So you can heal through all of those wrong views of God because Jesus is there. And the other thing that I think is really, really important in deconstruction / reconstruction, and I'm going to get to why I keep using the D word that Wes hates. Sorry. But
the D word.
The D word. But it is so important that when you start going through this journey of finding the real Jesus, you don't do it alone.
Yes.
Because if you step away and you decide to isolate yourself, you will not find the real Jesus. You will throw it all away.
Yep.
Or you will find Jesus, but also within that, you will hold on to unforgiveness and bitterness. You will not hold on to community. If you are in a community that is not how to have a healthy view of God, you need to seek wisdom and counsel from people who do.
Correct.
Because it is not good for you to be reading scripture outside of community. It is not good for you to be searching outside of community. When I was going through everything I was going through, and I told Cole this one time, but when I was going through wanting to throw all of it away, and I told Wes, I don't want to serve God anymore. Wes kind of just like looked at me and was like, okay, number one, you don't mean that. Number two, that is not a good idea. And I told Cole that, and he laughed, and he was like, that is so freaking powerful. And I was like, why that Wes wouldn't let me throw it away? And he was like, no, that it is not good for man to be alone. And you can't walk away outside of community, because in relationship with people that love you will say, you don't want to do that.
Yep.
Let's work through this, because it's not just Wes saying, let me clarify. It wasn't just Wes saying, no, you're not allowed.
Yeah.
That Wes is not my boss. Okay. Like that's, if I decided I didn't want to serve God anymore and I'd put my foot down and made that choice, there was ultimately nothing Wes could have done about that. But it was less of like, that's not a good idea. All these questions, let's look for an answer. Let's figure this out.
And it's also obviously we're married, but in any relationship, friendship, whatever, if you say something like that, it is I understand that you're going through some stuff. Mm-hmm. I'm here and I will walk through it with you, but you don't actually believe that at this moment. You're hurt.
Yeah.
The church hurt you. Mm-hmm. You feel like God let you down, and I understand that. And I think one of the biggest thing, and we've known this our whole life, like I've never not been told not to do this, but I think one of the biggest things I also said to you was like, because you were just talking about how angry at God you were, and like you were like, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm angry at God. I feel like he's betrayed me and all this stuff.
And I don't understand how this all works.
And I looked at her and I was like, then tell him that.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to talk to God, to Jesus, and just be like, I'm pissed off right now.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Yeah.
I don't get all of this stuff.
Yep.
And I'm angry.
Yeah.
And I looked at you and I was just like, it's a bad idea.
Yeah.
To walk away from all of this. And two, just tell tell him that.
Yeah.
Talk to God. Scream, cry, cuss him out. I don't give a crap at this point. Like, I don't care.
Yeah. Well, and we talked about this in our Genesis series that we're in right now, but we talk about Abraham and how, you know, God tells Abraham, like, you and Sarah are going to have a child, and Abraham and them, they basically laugh, and they're like, yeah. And, you know, and then he also tells him, you know, I'm going to make you the father of many.
Well, Sarah laughed.
Sarah laughed, yes. But he tells Abraham, like, I'm going to make you the father of many. Just go to Canaan. And basically, everyone looks at Abraham as, like, the man who had so much faith. But the whole time, if you read through Abraham, he's basically telling God, like, this is a joke, right? Like, this is a joke.
Him and Sarah both.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
They're looked at as, like, our mother and father
of the faith.
Of the faith, because they had so much faith. But if you read in scripture, the whole time, they're basically just like, this is a joke, right? Like, this ain't, we're not actually going to have a baby. We're never going to make it to Canaan.
Too old.
And Cole did this whole teaching on, man, it changed everything for me. This whole teaching on, it takes faith to doubt God. It takes, I'm going to freaking cry. It takes great faith to be like, I don't get this. And this doesn't make sense. And you freaking suck. But here I am.
I'm still here.
And that's what Abraham just like kept showing up, dude. Like, he just kept showing up.
Even though he had gotten it wrong.
He just kept getting it wrong.
Even though him and Sarah got it wrong. And they said, here's my servant.
Yep.
Go sleep with her. That's how you're going to get your kids.
Yep.
And then they still showed up.
Yep.
And God still showed up.
Yep.
And look what happened after that.
Yep. And like, that was just taught a couple months ago. Yep. I lost my dad over 4 years ago. And that still like resonates within me of like, I don't get any of this, but like, I'm just going to keep showing up. And before this episode gets too long, and we decide to like wrap it up, I do want to talk about this for a second, because it literally changed my life and the way that I viewed God. So as I started sifting through all of these things that I believed about Jesus, there was one day, it was like, man, maybe it was just last summer. Maybe it was last summer. I went to the pool with my friend Hannah. It was just me and her and Clark. I think Potter was like little. She had to have been.
It was last summer and she was little.
Yeah. But we went to the pool, and I was obviously, you have to know me and my friend Hannah, we're really, really, really close, and we have really deep conversations. Like, we don't just sit around and play on our phones and like, no, like, we talk. We get deep, right? And so I'm just sitting there, we're sitting in the pool, and I just kind of start talking to her about like where I'm at with God still, and how I still want to serve God, because there's something that I just don't want to let go of, because there is such a peace, there is such a place of me that like, he has changed my life, and he has shown up, and he's constantly teaching me how to show up for others. And that's something I want to follow. And I just looked at her with like tears streaming to my face, and I was like, but I don't know how to see him as healer, because when he was supposed to heal my dad, he didn't. So I don't really know. He's still been comforter to me. He's still been friend. He's still been all these other things, but healer, I'm really struggling with. And she just looked me in the face with the most like, she had tears in her eyes too, because you know that's what we do together.
It's not abnormal.
Yeah. And she just looked at me so calmly, and she's like, I think that's okay, Em. And I'll never forget that moment, because for the first time, I felt like this huge weight lift off of me of like, wait a minute, maybe she's right. I'd been so ashamed to like say that out loud, that like I didn't believe that God could be healer And I didn't know how to pray for people's healing. I didn't know if somebody was sick. Like I told Wes before, I'm like, if they want me to go to altars and pray for people who are sick, like count me out, dude. Yep. Like I can't, like, I don't know if he's going to do it or not. I have no idea. And I'm not the person. But Wes is the only person I really said that to. But to say that I don't know that I can view him as healer, and for someone to look at me and be like, maybe that's okay. And Sheila said, then maybe just view him as comforter. Maybe you don't know how to view him as healer right now, but in your brokenness, you need a comforter. So just let him be that. And I don't understand. I still don't understand this whole thing with healing. I still have so many questions. I still struggle to pray for people's healing because I'm like, I don't really know how this works. But I've also learned that he's not a wizard with a magic wand.
He's not
Dumbledore.
Dumbledore up in the sky.
Because I know for me, what I've learned about God and prayer through my deconstruction, reconstruction, is that you co-labor in prayer. So when you pray for the homeless, you say, God, help the homeless, give them homes, give them food, give them clothes. And then you partner with God and you go feed them, you go clothe them. When you say, God, deliver me from this, we co-labor with God and we take the steps to get the healing that we need and the deliverance that we need. So healing I struggle with because I don't know how to do that.
Yep.
But in the season of still not knowing, I've just decided that I want to just be like Abraham, who just shows up. Because at the end of the day, God led them to Canaan, and Canaan was the promised land that they had been looking for. So through my questions and through I don't really know if I believe this about God anymore. I've only just found a really kind God who is never upset at me for asking, who is very gentle and patient with me in the questions, who doesn't have a rule book of things that are like, well, if you don't do this, and this, you're just not really a good Christian. Or if you don't believe this, you're really just not on my top 10 list. Or I've really just only found a really gentle friend, father, comforter, who's just been nothing but kind. And anything that doesn't show up to me in the flesh like that is not Jesus. If people come into my life and try to teach me something that is not that, that's not Jesus. And I just know that's fine, but that's not the Jesus I found. Because the Jesus I found seeks justice. He is kind. He doesn't let me stay bitter. He doesn't let me stay angry.
But he can take it.
Yes, he can take it toward him. But he is not okay with me being bitter and angry at other people.
No.
A lot of times in deconstruction, reconstruction, people want you to say all the things that you believe are okay now. Well, what do you think's okay? Emily, on the podcast, you and Wes, you guys didn't say, well, what do you think is okay and what do you think's sin and what's not sin anymore? That's not the point.
That's why you're here. We'll probably never do that.
That's not the point of reconstructing.
Nope.
Is to find things that are okay. Emily, do you think alcohol is okay now?
How can I live my life and still get into heaven? Or how can I do what? Yeah, that's not what that's about.
Like Wes and Emily, what do you guys think about alcohol now that you've deconstructed reconstruction? That's none of your business because that's not the point. The point is that we're every day finding the real Jesus. as we've continued to go through this, I've started seeing humanity as beautiful. I don't look at humanity and see sinful. I look at humanity and see beauty. Something Wes started off with at the beginning was, if you've already started pulling things down in your journey, we encourage you to ask the questions of the things you pulled down. Maybe you did look at something in your walk and you're like, I don't believe that. That can't be Jesus. I don't believe that anymore. Great. Do that. But what do you believe about it?
Yep.
And replace it with the beauty of Jesus.
And ask a friend.
Yes.
Ask a pastor. Don't do it alone.
Seek wisdom.
Ask more than one person.
Yes.
That was the beauty of what we did.
Yep.
We had Cole. We had Pastor Casey. We had friends of ours that we would talk to.
I had Missy at church.
Missy. But like our circle of friends too. Like we would talk to different people and get different answers from different people. And then we were able to take that and kind of process that and then go back to Pastor Casey and Cole and be like, okay, like,
this is what people are saying, but can you really show me what Jesus said about this?
So like, don't like have a community that you can do this with.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what we talked about earlier.
Maybe you're in a place where you've already torn it all down and you didn't build it as you went. And maybe you've torn it all down and now you're just looking at like rubble on the ground.
Or you've turned your back on it.
Yeah. Or maybe you're listening to this and you're like, no, I've kind of given up on all that because none of the crap that people were feeding me made any sense. I want to encourage you that it is okay for you to just slowly start rebuilding. Jesus isn't mad that you threw it away. Jesus couldn't care less. He cares about you. But he doesn't really care about what you pulled down and the things that you don't believe anymore. Because honestly, all of those things that we think are such big deals that we have to believe this, Jesus literally couldn't care less about. Because all he really cares about is us.
He's sitting there saying, just come here.
Yeah, just come on.
Just come here.
Just let me give you peace. Let me give you your joy back. Let me find a community for you. Let me heal you. Let me sit with you. Let me mourn with you. Let me cry with you. Let me rejoice with you. And man, I really thought we were going to like get into the thick of it with this episode and just like talk about more like logical things. I didn't expect it to get this like Jesus, like he'll just let him call you this. We were giving an altar call right now.
I'm not theological enough to do all that.
I'm not really either,
We're
but
going to have to get Pastor Cole in here.
We will definitely get some people on.
Once we figure out a way to do this earlier in the day and have a babysitter, we'll have some guests.
Don't you worry. But Wes and I do think there is beauty in just reconstructing the way that you view God.
I think, I'm going to say this. Screw those words.
Yeah.
I think there's beauty in finding Jesus.
Yeah.
There's beauty in finding the real Jesus, the real God.
Yeah.
Who is he? Who is he to you? Who is he to humanity?
And it is also okay if the Christian religious like church world out there, if you look at that and think it's disgusting, that's okay, because sometimes we do too. There's a lot of stuff that Wes and I see on social media, and I'm like, I think I just threw up a little bit. I think I just threw up a little bit. And they stand on platforms and preach Jesus, and they did not just say that. And I'm here to tell you that it is okay if you still want to serve God and love God, even though that is out there.
Yep.
Because there are people who look at that and say, okay, we are not that. We really do genuinely love people. We really do genuinely just love Jesus and let him love us. And we are just loved by him. And that is the period. I know that there are people listening who probably wanted Maybe you wanted answers to your questions. Maybe you were wanting to know, well, I was told all my life that this was bad. So I wanted to know if this is still bad. I want to encourage you to just ask the questions and get in a safe community.
Be angry with God.
Be angry with God. Get to a real and raw place.
That's the best place.
Yeah. Because ultimately, and this is something else I had to learn, Jesus came to immerse himself into human suffering. He did not come to relieve us from it. Mm. And that's really hard for us to grasp because we think, well, Jesus, the Jesus we've been taught, is the Jesus that comes down and he just removes all these terrible things that happen. And that's not what Jesus did at all. Jesus removed the terrible things in us. When we look at God as the Dumbledore in the sky, who just says, boop, and everything just magically gets better, we have completely looked at God in an insulting way, because Jesus came to be with us in human suffering. And I think a lot of times we look at God and say, well, God, how could you let this happen? And a lot of times we stop looking at Jesus as the one that came to sit with us. He's not the one that lets things happen or does things. He's the one that comes and sits with us in our brokenness so that we are never alone. And that is where I've found comfort in finding him and throwing away all the other stuff. So that's our episode on those words Wes doesn't like. It's probably not what you wanted. But it's the realness from where we've been. We love you guys.
We love y'all.
Thanks for listening. Jinx. Pinch poke. You owe me a Coke. I don't even like Coke.
Like, comment, subscribe.
I'm a Pepsi girl.
Follow us on Instagram. Oh, God. I used to be. I'm a Dr. Pepper guy.
Oh, you are.
Follow us on our Instagram page.
Do you know they're their own company? They're not a part of Coke or Pepsi. That's wild. Follow us on Instagram.
Follow us on Instagram. We have an Instagram now. Spotify, iTunes, YouTube.
Yeah.
Leave us some reviews.
iTunes.
Apple, whatever. Sorry.
Apple Podcasts.
Showed my age a little bit there.
Wow, we're old.
Yeah, well.
Okay. We love you all. Bye.